Welcome to the Business of Apparel podcast. This is the place to learn how to start and scale your own apparel brand and fill it with loyal customers for years to come. I'm your host, Rachel Erickson, owner and CEO of Unmarked Street. I can't wait to share this episode with you.
Awareness and kind of seek attention that, helps you kind of prosper in the world. So,
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I agree with all of that. And I think, hiring team on our end, I speak about that sometimes on social media. I'm always trying to go out and say, yes, it will help you so much to become the CEO that you are, to hire our company and to come in and take that work off your plate. But I talk a lot too about having the courage as a brand owner. I'm in the same shoes as you. I have to go out and hire an executive assistant, someone to help keep me on time, keep me going, keep me understanding what's coming up next. I need a social media manager because social media is a beast and it's not my bread and butter. It's not what I know how to do every day. So I think there's a lot of courage that we all have to be business owners and to kind of admit what we don't know and be willing to hire that out, because otherwise we're just, we're actually in the middle of an exercise right now where we're trying to understand the actual cost of continuing to do it yourself. And so we're trying to apply some basic, let's say, for example, you decide to do all of your fittings yourself. And so because you're not an expert at it, you're going into 4, 5, 6 prototype fittings before you're happy with how it looks. And it's taking you years to get there because that's how long, that many prototypes would take. Imagine the savings that you could have if you could bring someone in who's an expert. You could get it done in 2 prototypes and you could launch in 6 months. It's just a totally different ball game when you talk about it that way. And so we're trying to put a little bit of ROI against it so that it's a little bit easier to understand, but it goes against your point so well.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of brand owners, they see it as a personal journey. They have an idea in their minds and they want to learn the ropes, and they're tied so closely to the product and to their market. They have a hard time kind of letting go of some of the control of that, just like big brands do. And I think there comes a point where small entrepreneurs, they have limited budgets and they really feel like by saving, by cost cutting or by being lean, I'm doing myself a service. But what they're not considering is that the time that you're taking to save those dollars is costing you market share. Because what if a competitor has already beaten you to that same idea, which this is a common occurrence? Because if your idea is filling a void in the market, that void is also there's a chance that someone else has recognized that.
Yep.
So is that helpful for you to kind of save time and money, but just by only doing, what you think you're good at, versus having someone like yourself or someone like Apparelmark come in and kind of elevate and reshape the opportunity for yourself? Yes, it's going to cost you, but that gate block of money spent, you have to think about what the opportunity cost is. And I'll just give you a small example of how brands think. So someone recently, came across the door and enrolled us in a vision. And so they wanted to do it was a micro collection, just a 2-style collection. And they spent, a considerable amount of money getting the product to be beautiful. They've also spent a considerable amount of money on a photo shoot, which we highly recommend. We want to make sure that your product looks good. It is marketed beautifully. They spend money on a beautiful website. They had everything lined up to go. But when it comes to ordering inventory, they said, hey, listen, I just want to be lean. I only want to start with 50 pieces. Well, guess what? In just 3 weeks, they had 60 customers and they sold out completely. Those customers, they had so much more demand that they just were not able to fulfill the orders. So and they spent all of this money already prepping for this beautiful kind of brand, and they couldn't fulfill. So what happens is that sometimes being over prepared or under prepared are same thing. You could be scared of having too much inventory, but guess what? There's also a flip side. You can have not enough inventory and you can lose, and you now have to wait 3 months to remake it. And that's something that is a lesson that these guys learned.
Yeah. Inventory balance and forecasting and all of that is probably a whole other episode that we could do, Andrew.
Oh, yeah,
Because it
exactly.
is one of the the more complicated things, I think, in our industry for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. And one thing I do want to mention in the future is like timelines. Most people, and I made this mistake when I first started in the fashion world. People call me up and say, I need this. Like, I have 2 months to bring it to market. I'm like, oh, sure, we can do it. And Kara used to get so mad at me. She's like, listen, 9 months is the minute. This is 9 months is what big
Thank you,
corporations do
nine
it.
months. Thank
There's
you.
a reason. There's a specific system that has been
Yes.
proven to build a super hyper successful brand. These brands learn the system and they all bounce up. There's a reason why this monthly thing exists, right? And so for us to go against that and try to say, yeah, we can do it in 4 or 5 months,
Hmm.
I'm sorry, but that's just a recipe for disaster. And so at Apparelmark, we've only worked, and we actually are very strict about timelines.
Yeah.
9 months to 12 is a brand new brand, especially a brand new, starting out brand. Those are the calendars we placed in, and we actually do workshops where we explain what happens throughout those 9 months and how
Oh,
it
that's
comes to
such a
be.
good idea. Yeah, that's great. I love that. And to be honest, we've had to do the same thing. We've had to turn away a couple clients who said, I have to launch in 3 months, and we didn't even have a tech pack yet. And we said, do you mean,
Wow.
be production ready in 3 months? And they said, no, I need product in my hands in 3 months. And we've had to say, I can't stand for the quality of what that's going to be for your line. And so
Yeah.
if you can find someone else who will promise that, great. But the advice I give in a lot of those calls too is, I understand that you really want to launch in 3 months, but I really recommend that you prepare yourself for 9 months, even if someone promises that 3 months to you, because it's just not realistic.
It's so true, and a lot of clients would say, "Well, someone said a factory said that they can do it, or I know
Yep,
a person who can."
exactly.
But I just from our experience and working this so long ago, when they say they could do it, it comes with a lot of ifs and buts, and it comes
Mhm.
with a lot of restrictions. So if you're free to go and explore that, and you learn that it's not actually like that, most people do still come back and say, "Okay, now I'm actually ready to listen." Because
Yes.
it's people have to learn their hard way. No one's gonna really always take your word for it. A lot of people learn by making their own mistakes. This is
Yeah.
just human nature. And
Yeah.
as
And we
much
have
as
a
we
lot
can
of
say,
client, sorry.
no, no, go ahead.
I would say we have a lot of clients too who, I've been working with for a couple of years now, and they'll tell me, I didn't realize how complex it was, and I didn't realize how long everything took. And so we're finally getting them onto a timeline that's really comfortable. Like we're like jamming, we're way ahead of time. We're like, we've got these beautiful samples. I got all this time to do like photo shoots and video shoots,
Yeah.
and that's the way it should be, right? We shouldn't be like squeezing everything in, rushing and stressing everybody out. And they just, that's one of the things I hear the most is I just didn't realize how complex it was and how time
Mhm.
consuming it was all going to be.
Absolutely. And then this is why it's so important to kind of have the consultant there with you, kind of help you throughout any of the questions you may have, because it's so much easier and it's reassuring to have someone that is in the same kind of boat as you and kind of helping you along the way. Plus, I think one of the biggest kind of advantages of also working with a consultancy is the fact that you can leverage their relationships. So, for example, they may pair you with a vendor you didn't even know. They can
Yes. Yep.
actually pair you with a vendor that they've worked before, and that vendor trusts them such a degree that they're willing to give you favorable terms or better
Yep.
price points. You would never have been able to do it on your own. And so straight up right there, just look, one point will can save you in the long run so much money because you made the decision to partner with someone who can help. That's just one of so many different elements. And that's just like such an easy explanation. That's one of the most common things like people ask, look, why should I pay? This is expensive, and what we come to learn is that especially startup fashion brands, I'm seeing in our point of view, we're seeing actually a trajectory where startup fashion brands are willing now to spend more than ever because they're the ones who can't afford to cheapen out. They're the ones who really
Mm-hmm.
need that edge, that innovation to be really working and working from the moment they launch because there is no secondary, it's so hard to recover from a poor launch. And so
Yes.
they almost need access to the top kind of talent pool the most because while corporate brands have already have senior people at certain positions, they wouldn't mind support. It's the startup brands that really need that cutting edge talent to really set them apart. And I think that is where it comes to the mental block of willing to spend money on
Yeah.
things that are gonna kind of help you out and kind of understand why that's important. And so
Yeah.
that is, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I'd be
what we
really
do.
interested to get your perspective and if you'd be willing to kind of share, and I'll share mine too, but like when you're kind of giving someone like a bird's eye view, maybe you have a brand new startup coming to you and they're saying, how much money do you think this is going to cost me?
Yeah.
And we're talking about development costs, we're talking about sampling costs, we're talking about fabric costs for production and then production fees on top of, hiring you as a consultant. I'd be really curious if you have like a ballpark number over like the, let's say the first year and a half or the first 2 years that you think they're going to spend while they're working on their line.
Yeah. So what do you, and when you, what, in terms of context, what's the scope of the line? How would you say how many styles or what?
Let's say we're just going to start with like 5 styles.
Yeah. So at Apparelmark, our typical client does anywhere from 3 to 5 styles. So 3 to 5 styles is your kind of core range, and that really allows you to kind of mix and match looks. We like to think of strategy in terms of like when someone's shopping in your line or on your website or whatever, you want to be able to kind of capture that individual client or individual customer or visitor to your website so they can buy multiple items at a time. So
Yes.
that is why it's important to have looks like the top and the bottom or different colorways, right? People buy in color. So the strategy behind having multiple SKUs and what those looks are is just as important as your actual design and your development and tech pack because the strategy leads. The strategy is what sets it up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, Rachel, you're an expert at this. It's something that you do better than anyone. You understand what that entails, both for startups and for corporate clients. So
Yeah.
being aware of what SKUs are going to succeed, having the your eye on the ball and on the pulse of the fashion world, and understanding what is kind of functioning, that's a huge advantage. Now, in terms of costs, I would say, depending on if you're doing it locally or internationally, that's a whole other conversation. There's a lot of pros and a lot of cons in both.
Yep.
And we've seen clients vouch for either one or the other. They both feel like there's incredible opportunity in both. And so for us, that we really want to make sure that we address both points. I would say I would for a 3 to 5 star, just to keep things short, I would say you need about 80 to 100K
Mm-hmm.
total investment to really give the brand a shot. And a lot of people come to us with the with budgets that we later say, hey, listen, your next priority shouldn't be about thinking of a product or thinking who to hire. Your next priority is to go out and get money. Your
Yeah.
next goal is how to get funding. That is your next goal. That is your checkoff. Because if you don't secure enough funding, you're going to start too small or not, you're not even going to get off the ground. Yes, you could still start, but you're going to stall. So why even bother wasting 20K if you for sure can make it? Why not save it, bank it, and then work, try to get 100K? And and again, there's so many different avenues how to obtain funding. And that's a topic for a different conversation, but I
Yeah.
hope
Yeah.
people really look into it and realize that someone else is able to do it. We work with people who are firemen, who are teachers, who just have regular jobs, but they were able to, through their means, secure that funding. So I feel
Yeah.
like if they can do it, what is stopping you? It's just about perseverance. It's about really focusing on that element and
Yeah.
not giving up and realizing that it will cost some X amount of dollars to start. But keep in mind, fashion is a high margin business. Fashion also can grow exponentially. For every
Yes.
person that wears your piece, someone else can see it on the street. Someone else can say, hey, wow, what is that? And all it takes is one right person to see it. We had a brand who didn't sell a lot of pieces in the first 30 days. And on day 31, someone from a major wholesaler store, a buyer, saw it and they ordered 300 pieces. Just it takes the one right person to see it and boom. And that's why fashion is so cool, is because it kind of advertises itself as people wear it. They are walking advertising. That is why it's so scalable. That is why it's so cool to see. And then it's such a personal journey to see your own
Yeah.
product in the street.
Yes.
It's super worth that investment. I know you can take that 100K, you can put it in a stock market, you can put it in a house, but guess what? Stock market returns what, 6-8%? Yes, so you only 90% failure rate.
Yeah.
That's fashion has a high failure rate, but it's not 90%. I can tell you that. So
No.
why not put it into something you actually believe in, something you are passionate about? That is a smart investment. So we've seen a lot of brands repositioning their kind of money that they saved from investing into stock or into homes, investing
Yeah.
into small businesses. That is becoming more and more common to see.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what you were talking about strategy. If you put strategy against the numbers up front and have healthy margins on your retail prices, like you said, a brand like that can grow exponentially. And as long as you have the startup money, you have the seed money to put into that first, development round, you as if you set yourself up in a healthy way, you almost there's a potential you will never have to do fundraising ever again. And so I'm actually going to one up you. I have been telling people at least 150 is what they need to have up front, and I've
Yeah,
heard
I
someone.
was trying to be conservative in terms of like, you know,
Yeah, and I've heard other people talking that actually a quarter of a million is where they
yeah,
recommend that you actually start. And then, like I said, if you put, it is six figures. It's a huge amount of money to raise and to start with. But once you put that in, if you work with someone who knows how to then turn your numbers around and help you with the business side of it, put a business plan together and make it work, you will see the rewards from that pretty quickly.
yeah, no, definitely. And I'm happy to, I'm happy about that. And I think that it's also important to understand that there's a certain barrier to entry from that. So that is why you don't see like every single person doing it. You need a healthy competition. But if you know that only people with X amount of dollars can enter, that kind of limits how much competition exists year on year. And it actually gives you an advantage to succeed because,
Yeah.
if there's too many people, if it's saturated, but because there's, cost X amount of dollars to enter, you're only competing with those who've also been able to enter that kind of field. And if you partner with the right consultant or agency, that is what's going to set you apart because both people spend 100K, but one person has a whole team that they've built and the other person kind of like is trying to do it on their own. So this is the kind of, you need to look for leverage in your
Yeah.
networks, but also leverage in how can you utilize the skill set that you have and appropriate correctly staff your positions. Because I think as a CEO of a brand, whether you're a
Mhm.
corporate brand or a startup brand, knowing how to staff talent, identify talent, and kind of
Mhm.
learn how to put the pieces together is just such a vital skill. It's important to run a company. That's what separates a great CEO from someone who's not, is that ability to kind of manage teams. And
Yeah.
as the brand grows, your team's going to grow. And if you're really good at learning how to do that initially, you're going to have a far easier time scaling initially.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Now, I want to be a little bit cognizant about time, but there is a really important, I think, discussion that you and I have kind of been pinging back and forth about for a little while. So I want to make sure we touch on it here. Now,
Yeah.
Apparelmark has been in business for 8 years. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And
Yeah.
on Mark Street, we just hit our second birthday. So we are like the kid sister to Apparelmark, maybe. But and so, we had a great 2022. And I've been talking about this a little bit in my social, but 2023 was a tough year. We saw a lot of corporations, big corporate, billion-dollar brands do a lot of layoffs in
Yeah.
2023. A lot of us who have been doing freelancing and consulting have, seen the opposite side of that, where we lost a lot of contracts because of those layoffs. And the industry has been really tough. Inflation is high, across the planet, and there's just a lot of just economic turmoil kind of going on
Yeah.
too. I really want us to just have kind of a real talk conversation about what's going on in our industry right now, because I think it's really hard to be out there as a brand or as a freelancer or someone who's trying to make it work. And if you're only ever hearing, everything's great and we don't know what you're talking about, like the economy's fine. I heard someone say, I'm choosing not to participate in the recession. And that's wonderful. Like if you're in a position where you have such a great program in place that you don't have to pay attention to the recession, you can just keep bringing money in. That's wonderful, but I don't think all of us are really realistically in that boat. So I just wanted to get kind of your perspective on what's been
Mhm.
going on through 2023, because being in business for 8 years, I think you'll have a much wider perspective than me. And so I'm curious to hear what you think. But also, what do we see coming up next for the industry and what are we kind of excited to see turn around?
Yeah, no, that there's so much to untap there, and I'm so happy you asked that question. I hope more people get to talk about the truth behind the fashion world and the ups and downs. It's not always rosy. There's a lot of challenges involved in terms of like the for from our perspective, servicing brands, working with brands, learning about their challenges, but also kind of addressing them. Apparelmark has also had I would say one of our toughest years on record in 2023, and that's for good reason, I think. And there's three main points behind that. Number one, of course, post COVID, we've
Hmm.
seen a lot of brands, bigger brands, scaling back inventories, inventories that were affected by supply chain issues, um, recession. A lot of brands are still kind of restructuring within the corporate world post
Yep.
COVID and how that affected them. That trickle effect has now affected investment companies. So venture capitalists, private equity firms, they're more resistant to investing in fashion just because they're trying to move their money around different markets. And because there's a stall in investment in fashion, that kind of creates a slowdown in amount of money available to be spent on services like Unmarked Street Apparelmark, which is fine because that is the overall feeling of the world. But it
Yep.
also affects the fashion community as a whole. So there is now restructuring, so brands are not able to start. Entrepreneurs are now have to be more conscious about having food and paying rent. They don't have excess money to kind of invest into the fashion startups, which of course means less clients for us, more difficult to kind of sustain ourselves.
Yeah.
And this is, the reality of the fashion cycle is that you are going to have to conquer challenging times. And so for us right now at Apparelmark, we're looking for ways to kind of overcome and not really be bogged down by our own kind of inadequacies or feeling of despair because
Yes.
we're trying to promote opportunity here, and there's always going to be opportunity where people see failure. So
Yeah.
for us, what I'm seeing and I'm just talking to people is that a lot of the brands who are still keeping at it and keeping score and trying to maintain growth, they're going to be in a great position when the recovery happens. So keep in mind, everything is going to have a yo-yo effect. There's going to be a
Yep.
rubber band. And when consumers are back after a couple of years of recession or whatever, however long it takes, the brands who are in position to capture that market and have products and collections ready to go, they're the ones who are going to reap the benefit of the rewards, right?
Right.
So if you're going to pull everything out now, by the time you are ready to get back, it'll be too late because the people are already going to be positioned to capture the market share. So we're seeing a lot of market share being captured in athletic world, performance world, even casual wear. You're going to see a lot of companies give up and gain market share based on how prepared they are two
Hmm.
years out. And this is why strategic planning is so important, both from a startup community and the corporate world. So as a startup right now, obviously, there's a lot of risk in terms of investing money for something that you may not necessarily have, but at least you should be having conversations with yourself, with your investors, or with consultants like a Apparelmark
Yeah.
or amongst Street. So you got to be able to kind of talk through and say, hey, I'm at this point now. This is where I want to be. Can you guys help me there? Maybe if not now, maybe later. You got to be able to plant those seeds. And same for us, like Rachel, between us and any other participant in the fashion world who's actively positioning themselves as an expert or as a consultant or someone who can help others. Our job is to leverage ourselves and to kind of unite our kind of powers
Yes.
because that is the best way we're serving the community. We're kind of leveraging what we know we need to do. We understand what's happening. And so by supporting each other, I feel like that is how we serve the community best and really maintaining that positive flow. Because if we all just stop working, then we're actually preventing startup brands from succeeding as well because
Yeah.
there's a trickle down effect. You take away people who can guide the brands to get there, you're going to see some brands not even make it. If we see less brands making it, the whole fashion world is affected. Consumers have less things to wear, innovation kind of stops, and things go nowhere. Now, last thing I kind of want to touch on, a lot of people say, well, fashion industry has a high failure rate.
Yeah.
Even at Apparelmark, we see 40 to 60% of brands will fail. But what's not being talked about is that the definition of failure in fashion is different than what most people think. No one that I know has gone kind of completely broke or bankrupt doing a fashion because when people say they failed, meaning they've bought inventory, they set up the shop, and they didn't sell quick enough to recover, or they just ran out of money to order more. But that
Hmm.
inventory they still have eventually got sold. So
Yeah.
people didn't sell in 3 months, maybe they took a year, but they got their money back in a way. But it's still considered a failure on statistically wise. But what's not talked about is what percentage of people do you think would reinvest or restart after a failure brand, a failed brand? I'm gonna let the audience kind of think on that, but I challenge anyone to think about any successful entrepreneur or owner today who didn't celebrate the failures. Most of them have started a business, learned, tried again. So the people that work with
Yeah.
us, they wear failure almost with a badge of honor. They feel they're so happy to learn from those mistakes, learn what the challenges are, and applying them to the next. So it's a process. It's definitely a process. And same for us. Like I had to learn the fashion industry. I came from zero experience. I made some mistakes along the way. I got in trouble with carrying the team. But over time, I'm so confident in what we are stand for. I've learned the ins and outs to like the back of my hand, so I can answer so many different questions from almost anyone. But I understand what it's like to learn, to fail, to get up and try again. And I hope that the fashion industry is so resilient as it
Yeah.
always has been, and people see this as an opportunity to do something where other people are failed or kind of reluctant to. This is now a chance for you to go get it and then really apply yourself, because I think that's what's going to separate you from the rest.
Yeah. Yeah. And what Andrew is talking about, I've heard it kind of say in this way, I've heard the most millionaires are made during recessions.
Yeah,
And it's because it's the people who are willing to put in the work during a time when it doesn't feel like it's reaping rewards. And so when it feels like you're failing or it feels like you're not hitting your goal numbers, but you're still putting in the work, you're still putting yourself out there, you're still planning for a future that will turn around at some point, like that, those are the people who end up coming out on top on the other side. And so
that's
if you're
perfectly
out
said.
there kind of struggling a little bit, like a lot of us are, keep going because this absolutely will turn around. We don't know how long this little period is going to last, but it always turns around. That's how the economy works. And so if you can keep going and keep working on your collection or keep working on your business or pivoting in your business, right now at Unmarked Street, we're down right now on client work. So we're figuring out how to leverage the education side. We talked about not enough information being out there from inside our industry. So we're going to give it to you. Like we're going to figure out a way to get that out into the world. And so if you're in a similar position and you need to figure out how to pivot or how to do something slightly different, I think being brave to do that and sticking with it, just like Andrew said, is really important.
I would also say that as someone who did a deep dive, like my first year of fashion, I did a deep dive into with Nicole's startup fashion program. I
Yeah.
signed up. It's such a cool thing to binge, like go through all of the modules. I also listened to Heidi's startup fashion
Yes.
podcast. And I think binging, it's such a cool idea. And I think, Rachel, it's so cool to have enough content there that you can just sit back for hours and just watch it and then retain information and then rewatch it. And I think bingeable content sticks with you easier than just one-offs, and rather
Yeah.
than just educational content. It's like a mix of, hey, here's a story about a client, here's tips and tricks of how I did it, or here's behind the scenes of this. And it's a variety of content that what makes it bingeable. And
Yeah.
it's so cool to have podcasts or videos that allow us as viewers to not only educate ourselves, but also to be entertained, but also be inspired. And I think that's what content like yours does, is
Yeah.
that
Thank you.
not only just does it work on the client work itself, but you're actually working on creating a community and creating an awareness of what it's like to be a consultant, what it's like to work with startup brands, what it's like to hire someone who can execute. And I think that is super valuable in general. And I'm so thankful that we have technology like podcasts available that allows us as consultants and also as buyers ourselves, as consumers of the services, which we all do. We all hire within our own understanding. Under Apparelmark, we always reach out to different experts and consultants for ourselves as well. And I think
Yeah.
that's important to note. We're all also consumers of the products that we put out. And I think
Yeah.
it's so cool to have educational materials readily
Oh, well,
available.
thank you. It's what I love to do. I think it's what I was just called to do. So it's been my pleasure.
Good calling. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on today, Andrew. This was an amazing conversation. I feel like we covered a lot of like fantastic topics. So if you're interested in reaching out to Andrew and hiring Apparelmark to help you with your apparel line, please go to apparelmark.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Excellent.
You
And you
got
can
it.
reach Andrew that way. They have a type form that you can fill in and apply to be part of their program. So, Andrew, we might just have to have you back sometime soon because I think we could talk all day and just get a lot of great content. So,
I Yeah, I
we'll have
love
you back
this.
soon.
I really hope it's our job to kind of throw as much tidbits of information and kind of golden nuggets to the viewers. And I'm so happy to keep going with different topics. And I think, as people watch this, I really hope they kind of expand their own understanding of what it's like to step into our shoes, but also kind of really encourage them and kind of challenge their own perspectives of what it's like to starting a brand. So let's keep the conversation rolling.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And I hope you all enjoyed this episode. You can visit Unmarked Street or thebusinessofapparel.com. You can download our free apparel development blueprint now and get on our email list to join the community. Talk to you guys soon. Thank you so much for listening to the Business of Apparel podcast. I would so appreciate hearing your thoughts on the show. And if you know someone who could benefit from it, please share it with them. My biggest desire is to help other apparel professionals understand the nuances of our industry so we can all work toward making better product for a better world. If you would like to connect further, I'd love to invite you to send me a message through my website, unmarkedstreet.com, where I do weekly trainings through my video channel, a monthly newsletter, and offer so many resources to help you start and scale a profitable apparel brand.